For 15 years, a senior North Korean government official sat in Pyongyang, reading classified briefings that ordinary citizens would never see, documents that shaped how an entire nation understood the world. Then one morning, a half-page report about Venezuela changed everything. What he saw wasn't just the fall of a distant government. It was a crack in the foundation of everything he had been taught to believe. Today, he shares what it looks like when a man finally chooses his own conscience over the system that formed him. If these stories matter to you, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. Your support helps us bring these untold stories to light. Together, we can be a voice for those who cannot speak. I still remember that morning. I had been working at a central government agency in Pyongyang. For over 15 years, every day, without fail, I sat down at 7 in the morning and opened my internal briefing materials, documents ordinary citizens would never be allowed to see, summaries of outside world news filtered and shaped by the party always pointing the same direction. American imperialist hegemony is running wild again. 15 years of reading those reports, and not once did I question which way they pointed. That morning was no different. Outside my window, the Taedong River lay still. The streets of Pyongyang were quiet and orderly in the early light. You know how it looks: clean roads, red banners, people walking in neat lines, portraits of the great leader posted at every corner. I had always taken that view for granted. Or maybe, if I'm being honest, I had chosen to. I poured a cup of tea and started turning pages one by one. Then my eyes stopped. Venezuela. Capital seized. Regime collapsed. The sentence was short, dry. U.S. Rapid military operation successful. That was it. Less than half a page. At first, I almost moved on. A distant country. Most people where I was from couldn't even point to South America on a map. What did a fallen government there have to do with anyone's dinner table? But the moment I walked into the conference room, that morning, something was off. Usually before meetings, there's small talk. Cigarette smoke drifting through the air. Bits of gossip: what happened yesterday, what's going on with so-and-so. Not that day. The senior officials sat with their heads down, murmuring to each other over documents. Their eyes were different. It's hard to explain exactly how, but it reminded me of my father's face when bad news arrived. Nothing spoken, but everything written on his expression. The senior official sitting next to me slapped his file down on the table and muttered low, "They never even got to fight." That was all he said. I didn't know whether to laugh it off or nod, so I just stared at the papers in front of me. The meeting started. No one put Venezuela on the official agenda. Routine business reviews, loyalty pledges, directives passed down. The meeting ran smoothly, as always, but the air in that room carried a weight completely out of proportion to that half-page report. Nobody said a word, yet everyone was turning that single sentence over and over in their minds. You could feel it. That day, as I closed my files, something shifted. I couldn't put words to it. A small unease. The kind you can't grip with your hands or say out loud to anyone. Just a faint ache in one corner of my chest. So faint it was almost nothing. I pushed it aside. How foolish that was, I wouldn't understand until much later. Days passed after the news made the rounds. On the surface, Pyongyang looked like nothing had happened. Every morning, state broadcasts reported the marshal's latest on-site guidance. The red banners still hung on the streets. Colleagues pledged loyalty at every meeting. But somehow, that calm looked different to me now, like everyone was pretending. Part of my job at the time involved compiling foreign situation reports. So I had a chance to look at the Venezuela material more closely, summaries closer to the original source than what ordinary citizens ever saw. The more I read, the clearer one thought became. What America had demonstrated wasn't just military power, it was speed. There was no negotiating table, no warning, no lengthy diplomatic process. One day, in the middle of the capital, it was simply over without announcement. Maduro never got a chance to fight back. I closed the file and sat there, staring at nothing. Older people who lived through the Korean War used to say you could feel war coming. The sound of artillery in the distance. Refugees moving south ahead of it. It arrived in pieces. North Korea's system was built around that kind of threat. There were shelters, civil defense drills, a military. We had been taught our whole lives, when the American imperialists invade, this is how we fight. But Venezuela wasn't that kind of war. The conditions for fighting never existed. For the first time, I let myself think about it from Kim Jong-un's perspective. What did he see when that report landed on his desk? American power? No. I think he saw something more instinctive than that. An ending without warning. When a leader disappears, everything stops. The meetings, the orders, the invisible architecture of fear holding the whole country together. North Korea isn't a nation built by many hands. It runs on the word of one person. The moment that one person vanishes, no one knows what happens next. Maybe he knew that better than anyone. That thought made my hands go cold. I wasn't afraid, or maybe I didn't know yet what fear felt like in that context. It was more like something solid that I had trusted for years. Something at the foundation of the system I believed in had cracked, just slightly, because of a country I'd barely thought about before. Looking back now, that was where it began. The term decapitation strike was nothing new in North Korea. We were taught about it from childhood. American imperialists plotting to eliminate the great leader. But I'll be honest, for a long time, those words had no weight for me. They felt like a slogan, something you heard and filed away. They say America talks about things like that, not something that could actually happen. Maybe you know the feeling. A warning repeated long enough becomes background noise. After Venezuela, it stopped being noise. One day, while sorting through documents, I came across a report I had glanced at before and moved on. An analysis of U.S. Special Operations capabilities. The first time I read it, it felt like a standard military summary of the enemy. This time, one section stopped me cold. The core of the operation wasn't troop numbers. It was precision. Not destroying everything in sight, eliminating one specific target. I set the file down and sat with that for a long time. That the entire system rested on one person, that wasn't new information. Everyone knew it. The marshal's word was law. His decision was the country's direction. But there's a difference between knowing that and accepting it as normal and recognizing it as a vulnerability. Like walking across a bridge you always assumed was solid, and then someone whispers in your ear that it's held up by a single pillar. What happens when the leader disappears? The meetings stop. No one knows who gives the next order. When people who have spent decades living by "do what those above you say" are suddenly forced to decide for themselves, this country could become something unrecognizable overnight. It wasn't the thought that frightened me. It was that the thought was realistic. Around that time, I began reading the faces in the conference room differently. Officials who always looked decisive, confident. I started wondering whether they truly believed it, or simply knew they had to project it. I was the same. Every day I said the words of loyalty out loud. But underneath, different questions were quietly taking shape. What would happen if someone knew I was thinking this? But deeper than that, fear was something else, the feeling that I had opened a door I couldn't close. Once you see something, you can't unsee it. I knew that. And still, I couldn't stop. Maybe that was the seed of everything that followed. I didn't know it then. Change doesn't announce itself. No one declared it. No official directive came down. It just shifted slowly, almost imperceptibly. The first thing I noticed was that coverage of the marshal's on-site guidance had grown shorter. His public schedule used to be relentless. Factory visits, military inspections, agricultural site reviews. The news photos always showed dozens of aides trailing behind him. The marshal at the center, personally overseeing everything. That was how the system showed itself as strong. But in the months after Venezuela, those photos changed. Fewer aides, noticeably fewer. The routes were shorter. Before, he might visit one site in the morning and another in the afternoon. Now, sometimes just one location a day. Sometimes no coverage at all for several days. The timing of announcements shifted too. Events that used to be reported the same day, or the next, were now coming out 2 or 3 days late. Anyone outside the system probably wouldn't have caught it. But I had been doing this work for a long time. The rhythm of these reports, what each pattern meant, was something I'd absorbed over years. And I wasn't the only one who noticed. One afternoon at lunch, an older colleague leaned in and said quietly, "Doesn't it seem like things at the top have gotten anxious lately?" I stopped chewing. We both knew exactly what he meant. You couldn't agree with it outright. You couldn't pretend you hadn't heard it either. I just lifted a spoonful of soup to my mouth and said nothing. He didn't push further. That was how we talked. After that, I paid closer attention. Security protocols shifted in small ways, nothing explained in any document. But the window between receiving advance notice of routes and the actual events had narrowed. Access restrictions in certain areas had tightened. Where preparations once began days ahead of time, final details were now sometimes coming down the morning of. The veterans all noticed. No one said a word. You know what that feels like? Everyone sensing the same thing, thinking the same thing, and complete silence. like a room where something smells wrong and everyone is holding their nose, but no one will say anything. Because the moment someone speaks, no one knows what comes next. In that silence, I felt something shift. Something that had held this system together for decades was quietly giving way, not because it had grown stronger. It looked startled, like a creature lowering itself into cover, hoping not to be seen. That was the first time the thought formed clearly. A country built on fear becomes a fearful country. The first time I saw Kim Ju-ae, I'll admit it caught me off guard. A young daughter standing on the platform at a military event. That wasn't something I was used to seeing. In North Korea, the supreme leader's family is kept completely hidden. The standard practice was that the existence of children, whether there even were any, was never officially acknowledged. So when Kim Ju-ae appeared the first time, there was quiet unease inside the system. I felt it. The people around me felt it. Was this early succession preparation? Was there another reason? For a while, she disappeared from view. Then, a few months after Venezuela, she started showing up again. Not with the same fanfare as before, not placed front and center, just quietly beside her father, a daughter next to her father, not to be displayed to the crowd, simply present. I stared at those images for a long time. Normally, when a successor is being positioned, there's a process. They earn credit. Their name is built up. People are given time to grow familiar. That's how this system had operated for decades. But the way Kim Ju-ae was being kept close again, this was different. Not in front, not behind, just there. I kept turning it over. And eventually, I arrived at this. It wasn't succession preparation. Something more immediate was driving it. It was proof of lineage. You want to know what has kept this system alive for decades? There's a concept called Paektu, bloodline, the legitimacy passed down from grandfather Kim Il-sung through blood. In this country, that bloodline isn't just family. It is the system. The leader's authority doesn't rest on capability. It rests on blood. So what happens if the bearer of that bloodline suddenly disappears? Without warning, like Maduro. In that moment, what's the last thing this system can lean on? Someone who carries the blood, who can continue the lineage. Someone you can't declare a formal successor yet, but who, if the unthinkable happens, needs to be as close as possible. The one person who could hold it together, that was Kim Ju-ae. When that thought landed, something in my chest went quiet. A father keeping his young daughter at his side like an insurance policy for the state. Is that what it looks like at the top of power? I didn't feel pity. It was colder than that. Every time I saw her face in a news photo, my daughter's face appeared over hers. My daughter was 12 then. She came home from school and hovered around the kitchen asking if there was anything to eat. I had no idea what Kim Ju-ae was thinking. But I knew this. I didn't want my daughter carrying the weight of a nation on her back the way that girl did. That thought reached something inside me. Something quiet. Something it hadn't touched before. In North Korea, nuclear weapons were always a source of pride. From the time I was a child, at school, at work, on television, our nuclear arsenal is the shield that protects us from American aggression. The sword the great marshal holds to defend his people. No matter how hard the international community pressed, we would never give it up. That was our dignity. When I was young, it even felt like something to be proud of. We had something no one could touch. But for a long time, I never thought deeply about what nuclear weapons actually meant. I understood them as a chip on the diplomatic table. America demands something, we put the nukes forward. America offers something, we pull them back slightly. That was the transaction. There had been negotiations over the years. Agreements made and broken. I had handled the documents myself. After Venezuela, I stopped seeing them that way. Maduro had no nuclear weapons. That might sound like a simple fact, but the more I sat with it, the louder it got. Maduro had an army, a support base, years of entrenched power, and still it ended without warning. Not just because he had no nukes, but without them, America had nothing to hesitate about. The speed was possible because there was nothing to fear. For the first time, I understood why Kim Jong-un would never give them up. Not a negotiating chip, not a diplomatic instrument. One thing, only a lifeline. History had shown what happened to leaders who surrendered their nuclear programs. Iraq's Hussein, Libya's Gaddafi. No one inside the system said those names out loud. But the people who needed to know, they knew. Give up the weapons, and what waits on the other side of the table becomes clear. So surrendering them was never an option. It never could have been. Think of it this way. Imagine you have one key, the only key that locks your front door. The moment you hand it to someone else, you can never get back inside. As long as you hold it, no one can break down the door. Maduro had no key. The door was broken down. I let that settle in slowly. This country didn't have nuclear weapons to protect its people. It had them to keep one man in power. Everything in this country, every sacrifice, every restriction, every hardship orbited around that one man's survival. That understanding settled in my chest like something heavy. It was the day I finally saw clearly what this system was actually running for. That night, I came home and stood over my sleeping daughter for a long time. The thought that this child would live her entire life in service of one man's survival for the first time, it felt intolerable. Not just wrong, intolerable. When people are frightened, they do one of two things. They run, or they clench their fists. People do it. Countries do it too. After Venezuela, North Korea chose to clench. The change came gradually, but it was unmistakable. First, the ideological study sessions increased. An already packed schedule of loyalty training got heavier. Weekly sessions became twice a week. The content grew more specific. Infiltration routes used by outside forces, suppressing internal unrest, rooting out impure ideology. The language was always grand, but by then, I knew exactly where it was pointed. The reports flowing upward changed too. Internal reporting is supposed to deliver reality as it is, but somewhere along the way, that became harder. Bad news, once submitted, had a way of coming back to haunt you. Not outright punishment, more like a chill in the room, or a less favorable placement in the next assignment cycle. So naturally, reports became optimistic, not because things had improved, because they were written as if they had. Do you understand how dangerous that is? The leader loses sight of reality. He understands the state of the country, the condition of the people through what his subordinates send up. If every single report is written in soft, reassuring language, it's like a doctor telling a sick patient every day, nothing to worry about. The patient feels better. The disease gets worse. Questions became more dangerous too. There had always been a line you didn't cross. But in private, among trusted people, it wasn't completely unheard of to let something slip. That line moved inward. It kept moving. You had to watch your eyes. Watch your face. One day I caught myself actively working to look like someone with nothing on their mind sitting in a conference room, performing blankness. And then something strange happened. The tighter the system squeezed, the clearer my thinking became. Not more afraid, clearer. Like a fog lifting. The harder it pressed, the more visible the thing it was trying to hold together. That was when I first thought, strong countries don't do this. Something truly solid doesn't need to clench this hard. If a system can only survive by sealing every exit, controlling every word, monitoring every expression, that isn't strength. That's panic. This country, it might be weaker than I thought. The night that thought settled in, I slept deeply for the first time in a long while. Strange as it sounds, I felt light. The relief that comes from finally setting down something you've been carrying too long. Before I fell asleep that night, for the first time, I thought it clearly. I need to leave. From the day I decided to go to the day I actually went was 6 months. Those 6 months were the longest of my life. I went to work. I sat in meetings. I pledged loyalty out loud. And all the while, I was doing a completely different kind of math in my head. Walking my daughter to school each morning, I'd count how many more times would I walk this path. I never told my wife. Knowing would have frightened her. And not knowing meant her face stayed natural, stayed safe. The night I crossed was overcast. The clouds hid the moon, and for that, I was grateful. The river was colder than I expected. There was a moment when my feet lost the bottom, and in that moment, my mind went completely blank. No fear. Just one thought: keep going. On the other side, I crouched down by the water's edge. Catching my breath, I turned and looked back. Somewhere across that river was the house where I had lived. My wife was there. My daughter was there. When did she realize I wasn't coming back? She would have thought I'd gone to work when she woke up that morning. By evening, that's when it would have changed. Tears came. I couldn't make a sound. I pressed my mouth shut and gripped the earth beside me. Cold dirt. The same dirt as on the other side of that river, really, and somehow that made it worse. Maduro had vanished from Venezuela, but his shadow had stayed in Pyongyang. Kim Jong-un was still alive. The system was still running. My crossing changed none of that. I was the only one who had left. Somewhere, at that very moment, someone was softening a report before sending it upward. Someone was sitting in a conference room, working to keep their face empty. Nothing had changed over there. What had changed was me. Crouching there by the water, I heard my old colleague's words again. It seems like things at the top have gotten anxious. That was the system's true face. Not clenching from strength, clenching from shock. Not running for its people, running so one man could survive. I had left that country. Was I free? I couldn't say yes. Couldn't say no either. I had left too much behind. Every time I should have felt light, I felt heavy. My daughter's face kept coming. That child, still so young growing up without her father. But I crossed the river because I didn't want to live as another piece of a country built on one man's fear. That was all. It wasn't a grand decision. I just wanted to breathe once on the other side of it. The far bank was still dark. But that night, for the first time, the darkness didn't frighten me.